In the heart of a brutal alien bazaar, abandoned and stripped of her worth, an alien girl stands vulnerable. But when a human, against all odds, steps forward, he offers her something more precious than freedom: dignity. Will she find hope in his gesture? The air was thick with the scent of alien spices, sweat, and metal. The bustling alien bazaar sprawled before her, its towering structures made of dark stone and shimmering metals, casting long, oppressive shadows over the crowd. It was a market like no other, where beings from every corner of the galaxy came together to barter, sell, and trade in items that ranged from the bizarre to the dangerous. The alien sellers, their eyes cold and calculating, hawked everything from exotic creatures to weapons of unimaginable power. But amidst this cacophony of voices, amid the shouting and haggling, one figure stood out, a figure stripped of dignity, left exposed like an object for sale. She was no longer a person, not to them. They had taken everything from her: the clothes on her back, the pride she had once carried, and most of all, her humanity. Her arms were bound with coarse, unyielding ropes, the skin raw from the strain. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear and confusion, but her body, her fragile alien form, was laid bare for all to see. The people who passed by barely spared a glance. Some were too busy to notice. Others looked away, disgusted or indifferent. She had once been proud of who she was. She had a name, a history, a life. But that life had been stolen from her, piece by piece, by her captors, who had deemed her worthless. Abandoned here, in the cold heart of the bazaar, she was now just a display. She had no voice, no power, and no hope. Her past was a blur of captivity: shackles, cold cells, and cruel faces. The traders had bought her as though she were an object, a commodity to be used, to be exploited. But when they had grown bored of her, when her value to them had diminished, they had discarded her here, like a broken tool, to be forgotten by the very same marketplace that had once called her valuable. Her bare feet barely made a sound on the cold, hard stone beneath her as she stood, head lowered in humiliation. Her hair, matted and unkempt, hung in tangled strands around her face, but she dared not move it. She had learned long ago that movement meant punishment, and she was too tired to care. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her body trembling from a combination of fear and exhaustion. It was then that she saw him. A figure walking through the crowd, his gaze calm, his posture assured. He was human, one of the rare few who traveled to places like this. His clothes were simple, yet they had a certain grace about them. There was something different about the way he carried himself, something that stood out in a world filled with cold, calculating merchants and emotionless traders. At first, he seemed like any other passerby, someone lost in the sea of strange faces and alien languages. But as he neared her, something changed. He stopped. The bustling market continued around them, but for a brief moment, everything seemed to slow down. The noise dimmed, the people blurred, and it was as if the world had come to a halt. His eyes locked with hers, and for the first time since she had been abandoned, she felt seen. It wasn't pity. It wasn't disgust. It was something else, something she couldn't name, something she hadn't felt in so long. It was recognition. For a long moment, they stood there, his gaze unwavering, as if he could see past the ropes, past her nakedness, past her broken spirit. He saw her. Truly saw her. And then, he spoke. "Are you all right?" His voice was low, gentle, and filled with an unmistakable sincerity that cut through the noise of the bazaar like a beam of light in the dark. She could barely comprehend the words at first. Her mind was clouded by fear and confusion, and yet, something in his tone made her feel safe. It was as if he hadn't just asked the question out of politeness. He had asked it because he genuinely wanted to know. She opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. Her throat was dry, constricted by the weight of her captivity, her humiliation, and her shame. But she didn't need to speak. In that brief, fleeting moment, she realized something that shook her to her core. He wasn't just asking about her physical condition. He was asking about her. The person beneath the layers of hurt and degradation. The human stepped forward, his hand reaching toward her. He didn't touch her, not yet. But his presence was a shield, a barrier against the cruel eyes of the crowd. She flinched at first, but something told her this time would be different. This time, she could trust him. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. The words had an unexpected weight to them, like a promise. And, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she believed them. He moved closer, his face softened with concern. He untied the ropes binding her arms, his hands steady, careful, as though he understood the fragility of the moment. The ropes fell away, and her arms hung limp at her sides, aching from the long hours of restraint. But they were free now. For the first time in too long, she felt the barest hint of relief. "You're not worthless," he said, his voice low but firm. "No one should be treated like this." She blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. She had been told otherwise her entire life, told that she was nothing more than an object, something to be sold, to be discarded when no longer needed. But here, in the midst of this alien marketplace, he had just given her something that no one else had dared to offer: dignity. His gaze never wavered as he looked into her eyes, as though he was waiting for her to say something, anything. But she didn't know what to say. She was speechless, overwhelmed by the kindness that radiated from him. The human's hand hovered near her face, his fingers trembling as he gently brushed a strand of hair from her eyes. She flinched at the touch, not from fear but from the rawness of it. It had been so long since anyone had shown her this kind of tenderness. "Come with me," he said, his voice a steady anchor in the chaos of the market. "I'll help you." It wasn't just an offer. It was a lifeline. In that moment, she knew he wasn't just giving her freedom from the ropes. He was giving her freedom from the years of torment, from the belief that she was less than nothing. And for the first time since she had been abandoned, she felt like she could breathe again. With trembling legs, she took her first step forward, her heart pounding in her chest. It wasn't a leap of faith, it was a tentative step toward something she hadn't known she could hope for. She wasn't sure where they were going, but for the first time, she knew it didn't matter. She wasn't alone anymore. The human's hand, still resting near her elbow, guided her through the bazaar, and as they walked, she couldn't help but notice how the world seemed to shift around her. The alien traders who had once looked at her with disdain now seemed to ignore her, their gazes slipping away, too uninterested to look twice. She was nothing to them. To most of them, she was just another broken thing, a slave left to rot in the marketplace. But to him, she was something else. She was someone. For the first time, she felt herself seen. And not as a broken, discarded creature, but as a person. She couldn't speak at first. The words felt heavy, like stones lodged in her throat. Her voice was nothing but a whisper, too fragile for the world to hear. But the human seemed to understand. He didn't ask her to speak. He didn't rush her. Instead, he simply walked beside her, one hand close enough to her shoulder to offer comfort, but not so close as to make her feel overwhelmed. His presence was steady, like a gentle stream flowing beside a path, guiding her without forcing her. They passed by stalls of strange exotic foods, their smells pungent and unfamiliar. She felt her stomach growl, but she had no desire to eat. Her mind was preoccupied with other thoughts. The human's voice broke through the silence. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone calm but curious. For a moment, she hesitated. Her name was a relic, a distant memory, one she hadn't uttered in so long. They had taken that from her too, the ability to speak it, to claim it as her own. She was just a number to her captors, a mere possession. But in that moment, something shifted inside her. She remembered the way her name had once sounded, full of life, full of promise. I don't know," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "I don't remember." He nodded, not in pity, but in understanding. There was no judgment in his eyes. It was as though he had expected this. She could feel his patience, his empathy wrapping around her like a protective cloak. "That's all right," he said, his voice warm. "We'll figure it out. You don't have to know everything right now. Just take your time." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of something profound, a promise that there was no rush, that she was allowed to be who she was at her own pace. And somehow, that made all the difference. As they walked further into the bazaar, she began to notice the subtle ways he moved, carefully, with purpose. He didn't act as if he were in a hurry. He didn't rush past the stalls like the others, eyes scanning the goods for the best deals. He seemed more concerned with her, more attuned to her than to anything else. It was as though, in that moment, nothing mattered except for her safety, her comfort. They reached a small alleyway that seemed to stretch off into the shadows, far from the noise of the crowded market. The human turned to her, his gaze soft and reassuring. "This is where we'll stay for now," he said. "It's not much, but it'll be safe." She glanced around. The alley was quiet, tucked away from the chaos of the bazaar. The stone walls were worn, cracked with age, but the place felt calm, almost peaceful. It was a stark contrast to the noise and violence of the market. She took a deep breath, realizing how much she had needed this silence. He led her into a modest, makeshift shelter, a small room with a few cushions on the floor, a small fire pit in the corner, and a few supplies strewn about. It was simple, yet it felt like a sanctuary, a haven from the world outside. The human motioned for her to sit, and she did, feeling the warmth of the fire on her skin for the first time in what seemed like forever. "Can I get you something to eat?" he asked, his voice gentle. She shook her head, still too overwhelmed to answer. The truth was, she wasn't hungry. She didn't know what she needed. What she wanted was to understand why he had helped her, why he had chosen to be kind when no one else had. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a silent question. He must have seen it, because he knelt down in front of her, his expression soft and earnest. "You're not alone anymore," he said, his voice quiet but resolute. "You're not worthless. You're not a thing. You're a person, and you deserve to be treated with dignity. I don't know what happened to you before, but I'm not going to let it define you. I won't let you be forgotten." The words hit her harder than she had anticipated, and before she could stop herself, tears welled up in her eyes. She had never heard anything like it. Not from anyone, not ever. She had been told she was nothing, that she was expendable, that she was unworthy of care or attention. And yet here he was, telling her she had worth. Telling her she mattered. It was overwhelming, and for the first time in so long, she let herself believe it. "I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do." He reached out, his hand gentle on hers, and she felt the warmth of his touch spread through her. "You don't have to know right now. You don't have to have all the answers. But I'm here, and I'll help you figure it out. We'll go at your pace. You can start over. You don't have to carry the past with you." The sincerity in his words struck deep. It was the first time anyone had ever given her the freedom to let go of the past, to not be burdened by the weight of what had been done to her. It was the first time someone had told her it was okay to be lost. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He smiled, a soft, reassuring smile. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just doing what anyone should do." The night stretched on, and they sat in silence, the fire crackling softly between them. She didn't know what the future held, and for the first time in her life, that was okay. She had been given something she hadn't had in years: hope. It was a fragile thing, but it was there, flickering like the flames before her. The next day, he helped her clean up, find clothes, and begin to piece together what was left of her life. They didn't talk much, but with every passing moment, she felt more and more like herself again. Every small act of kindness he showed her, every meal shared, every word of reassurance, was like a thread, weaving her back together, slowly but surely. And in the weeks that followed, they grew close. She learned his name, Jack, and his story, and in return, she shared what little of her past she could remember. The memories came back slowly, in fragments, small flashes of her life before she had been captured, before she had been broken. And with each piece of her past that returned, Jack was there, offering her strength, offering her dignity. Together, they began to rebuild piece by piece, a life that had once been lost. She wasn't sure where the journey would take them, but for the first time in a long time, she was no longer walking alone. She had found something in Jack, someone who saw her not as a broken thing, but as a person deserving of respect and love. And for that, she would be forever grateful. In the end, she realized something that had eluded her for so long: dignity wasn't something that could be taken away. It was something that could be given back. And for the first time in years, she had it, thanks to a stranger who had chosen to see her, to care for her, when the rest of the galaxy had turned its back. The human had given her more than freedom. He had given her the one thing she thought was lost forever: herself.